All right, so here we are, Masters of the Wild, a guidebook to Barbarians, Druids, and Rangers. Now, this was one of my personal collection products that I used a lot, and as you can see, has a fair bit of wear on it as a teenager growing up playing D&D. It is a simple 96-page role-playing game book, no color, all black and white on the interior, and let's take a look at the table of contents. So right off the bat, we see like nature's lore, barbarian perspective, the druid perspective, the ranger perspective, and it goes into like the different species and the relationships with that class, the relationship of that class with other classes, and then some other aspects specific to that class. So for instance, the barbarians talking about raging, the druids talking about wild shape, and the ranger is very much about like urban rangers and favorite enemy and stuff like that. The next section, they go into feats, which is a huge part of the 3rd edition lexicon, essentially. Tools of the trade, so kind of new weapons, new magic items, infusions, which is a new thing they introduce. Animals, so new animal companions, ways to run the animal companions, and some new animals to have and improve, and then prestige classes, and then finally with spells. There's actually a whole bunch of great stuff in this book, so I don't know how long this is going to take, but I think it's like really worth like delving into because it's such a great. I mean, for me, it's such one. It's a very nostalgic, and two, it's also like really good. So like look for species in the barbarian, like the barbarian perspective, like humans, dwarves, elves. For every single species, they go over the relationship with the other classes, very written out. So like the barbarian and the monk. If you have an opposite number, it has to be the monk. Your zest for life and focus on reality are diametrically opposed to her philosophy of withdrawal from the world. You have no trouble expressing your opinions, but she's terribly reserved. She must either be afraid of something or too stifled to show her feelings. Other people claim that your approach to life and hers are both valid, but you think she's simply wrong. Don't worry too much about her choices, though, as long as she doesn't try to impose them on you. So, very much, or for instance, barbarians and sorcerers. Here's a fellow who can fire off some very flashy spells, but his power doesn't come from gods or even the books like Wizards does. He says his spellcasting ability is natural, and maybe that's true. He does wield his power with an easy grace, as though it were part of him. And as long as he's honest with you about his abilities, he treats you with respect, there's no reason the two of you can't become close friends. But if he tries to forge an air of mystery about himself, as some sorcerers do, he's likely to earn your anti-apathy as well. So very much like it's great for setting the like tone and mood for characters and characters of that style. So very much love all of this. Very briefly, choosing when to rage. This was a very interesting like mechanical section. Of course, this is very specific to just like the technical bits of like not having a lot of resource to spend and when you can use it and then how often you should use it. Druids, very much about wild shape. I believe they actually, the druid may use wild shape to become a dog, for example. The druid can freely designate new forms of minor physical qualities, so very much going in depth about like how you can use it to essentially customize yourself. Must fall within the norms of the animal. If the druid is effectively disguised as an average member of that new form species, so rules clarification on disguise or using wild shape as a disguise. Confirming about the form. So this actually talks about infusions, essentially, which is a way of casting magic or using spells while in wild shape. And then for the ranger... Oh, and then a very cool bit about using wild shape, or like different methods to use wild shape. Detecting, escaping, fighting, impressing foes, impressing other animals, scouting, training animals, and traveling. Now, some of these, they talk about specific examples, like incredible fly speeds, or circumstance bonus to handle animal check when using wild shape to train animals, or using it to impress other animals, or intimidate. So there's very much like... The thing with 3rd edition is that it very much lost itself to glut, But in the early framework days, it was a lot of opportunity for mechanical expression. And although eventually it did become too much, it dove very much into interesting ways that they could manifest. So what's interesting here is like choosing a favorite enemy. Here's some choices, and like why you should choose them or what you would go up against. Skills and feats. Handle animal, going into animal training and tricks. Also creature tricks for your animal companion, because not necessarily they followed your order exactly. So like hide, tail someone, wilderness lore, and then we get into feats. Now this will be a very quick section because feats were very specific to the mechanics of 3rd edition and, well, D&D as a whole. So we can just kind of look briefly at what they are. So like animal control, instead of rebuking undead, you're essentially commanding an animal via speak with animals. So essentially rebuke undead, but with animals. Animal defiance, you can turn, so essentially like making the cleric, but with animals. Blind sight, only when in wild shape you would gain the supernatural abilities of some of these creatures. Brachiotan, or I think that's how it's pronounced. Moving through trees, so very much like, here we go with movement, wrestling, destructive rage, being able to destroy stuff essentially, extended rage, extra favorite enemy, all that sort of stuff. Favored critical, resiliency, flight, swimming, multi-attack. Nothing really too off. Offhand parry is an interesting one. So ambidexterity and 2-weapon fighting were multiple feats that you had to get to essentially wield 2 weapons without too many minuses. Plant defiance, plant control, same thing like the cleric, but with plant specifically. D&D 3rd edition tried to separate essentially the verdant lord and the master of beasts kind of thing. So like trees were separate from the creatures. Remain conscious, that's a barbarian thing. Resist disease, resist energy. Shadow snatch. I'm not too sure what shadow is. I'm actually curious. Create infusions, and then wild shape feats, which allowed you to use certain supernatural abilities in wild shape. So natural spell, casting while in wild shape, proportionate wild shape, being able to change your size, scent, speaking wild shape. So speak in wild shape. Let's actually take a look at what shadow is. I'm actually very curious because it's been a long time. Oh, already reached the end. Shadow. You gain a bonus on height and spot checks. So that was actually kind of a common thing that happened every so often, is that some feats were literally just skill bonuses. And that was sort of like an okay thing, but mechanically, it doesn't do that much, and which makes it kind of boring. Whereas things like speaking in wild shape, it gives you possibilities to do so much more. All right, on to the next section of exotic weapons. So we got the blowgun, the crossbow winch, the naginata, the mighty naginata. I'm not sure why the naginata ended up in this book, out of like all places for a naginata to end up. Larger blowgun, and then a caber. I'm actually not sure what the caber is. It's just a totem. I guess pointy totem. Yay, illustrations. I loved the 3rd edition illustrations of the weapons. As you can see, interestingly enough, it didn't happen too often, but you'll see this with like the arms and equipment guide as well from 3rd edition, is that some weapons did have these interesting properties that would make them useful. Now we go into magic items. So the interesting thing about magic items was there were special abilities. So instead of your +1 armor, or leather armor, or studded leather armor, you could replace that +1 with a special ability. And this made weapons very interesting. So you would have the equivalent of a +5 Holy Flaming Longsword, which is actually... Well, here, let me take a step back. So for instance, if we had let's just say, aquatic studded leather armor, that would be the equivalent of a +2. So if you had a +1 aquatic studded leather armor, it would be a +3 total. Sorry, I'm like doing math in my head and thinking ahead. And so the benefit of this is that the +1 gave you a bonus to your AC, your armor class, which would made you more difficult to hit. And so these bonuses were essentially trade-offs that you're giving with these magical bonuses with these like enchantments to do different things. So like ease allows the wearer to rest comfortably overnight without removing the armor, regardless of how heavy it is. So, and you can easily don and doff the armor in 5 rounds, or you can easily don the armor in 5 rounds and doff it, removing your armor in a single round. So this is great for like heavy armors, or I assume this was intended for rangers, but I can see definitely applications in the heavy armor category. Wild, you retain the armor while in wild shape, and it melds. And so there was a thing where if you had magical armor and you wild shaped, you would lose the armor bonus of the armor you're wearing and take on the armor of the creature, essentially, which was essentially just your dexterity and size. And so this would effectively meld with you or alter form with you and give you that armor bonus, which would essentially be +3 or 4 at this point, because it would be +2 and maybe the +1 of the magical. So very useful magical items. But if we're looking for inspirations, aquatic, let's see, able to move freely throughout water without the need for a swim check. That's a very useful enchantment. But drowning rules also apply unless you are also enchanted with water breathing. And then at the bottom here, there's prerequisites. So back in 3rd edition, there was a lot of crafting that happened that you were allowed to do. So 7th level, prerequisite, crafting magical arms and armor feat, freedom of movement, and water breathing as requisite spells to know in order to build it. So very interesting to know. So then ease, we know about donning and doffing the armor very efficiently. And then wild warps with you. Wild armor is one of those cool things that just kind of go hand in hand with the druid, and always something to think in mind when you have shape-changing characters. And then they have the example, so specific armors. When first found, this +2 plate often appears to be made of steel, but in actuality it's composed of wood. It has been permanently rendered with ironwood spell. Excuse me one second. Ironwood was specifically used for druids because they were not allowed to wear metal. This was a druid-specific thing back in the 3rd edition days. I'm not sure if it's a 5th edition thing anymore. So, and then Aquari's armor appears to be finely crafted with +2 full plate, specifically cut for someone who fights atop a mount. It gains +1 competence bonus on right checks. In addition, Aquari's armor grants the wearer +2 enhancement bonus to dexterity and increases its speed by 10 feet. Seems like a ranger style or even mounted barbarian style armor. But if we wanted to, let's look. So gray ironwood suit, that's a great visual inspiration of a wooden suit of armor. And then Aquari's armor is very much someone who is getting on and off their mount a lot. It is interesting that you're getting a bonus to right checks, but grants the wearer's mount a +2 bonus to dexterity and increases its speed. Okay, for a second I read it as it increased the wearer's speed, not the mount speed. So very much all about mounts. It reminds me very much of like the Elden Ring early boss. So, magic weapon special abilities. Exhausting deals 1d6 points of damage. However, it is non-lethal or subdual damage. Hunting doubles the favored bonus. Opposable. A creature who lacks the proper hands for this weapon can wield an opposable weapon. Wait, what? Is this for someone who doesn't have hands? This enchantment creates 1 or more thumb-like projections on the weapon. These artificial thumbs fold around the appropriate limb of the wielder to allow proper use. What? To wield an opposable weapon, a creature must have corporeal limbs and have proficiency with the weapon and be able to stand without the limb that the wielder wield the opposable weapon. So essentially, if you have like a kangaroo, you could wield a sword. But the tricky thing with this, interestingly, is that it makes no sense for a player because we would extend the fantasy to that. So it's very much a design thought is that if you had a player who was going to do something, it would be very much more rule of cool. I can wield this with both hands or one hand or whatever. Like, we're not thinking about if a kangaroo can grip a sword. So we're probably very much just going to allow it to happen. But if it's an opponent, maybe that would be a very interesting detail to add, that this creature has some sort of magical thing that is granting them the ability to wield a weapon. My favorite, one of my favorite joke items is the Arrow of Cure Light Wounds. It does no damage, and instead the target is affected by a Cure Light Wound spell, which deals 1d8 plus 1 healing, not damage, heals 1d8 plus 1 healing. And then you have moderate wounds, and you have serious and critical wounds as well. Always great to shoot people in combat to bring them back up. Berserker Blade. When the wielder flies into a barbarian rage, the enhancement bonus increases. Kind of cool. Would be very cool to have a visual aesthetic to that. Potion, essentially animal logic, giving you the ability to intuit animal handling. So it kind of reminds me of like Witcher stuff almost, especially with these plus 10 bonuses. Wilderness lore, and handle animal, or even intuit direction. Intuit direction was a very fun. I forgot that was even a skill back in 3rd edition, in which, like, if you wanted to know where north was or which direction you were going, it was a skill on its own called Intuit Direction. Overall, nothing really interesting there. Boots of Endurance, Collar of Cleverness. So collars were interesting, some sort of items for your steed or your animal companion. Goggles of Following, Helm of Bonding. Let's see here. Necklace of Favorite Enemy Detection. This is actually a really great item for any game, or any low fantasy to high fantasy, in terms of, like, sting glows when orcs are nearby kind of thing. Or when goblins are nearby. Standing Stones. This is especially just, I think you can just store a spell. Yeah, cast a single spell when in contact with it. The creator chooses a spell and sacrifices, such a cow or pile of gems. It activates it. Therefore, the druid can use meld into stone without. Once she has done so, she can activate the standing stone for herself, making the designating friendship from that point forward. Though whenever the druid is in contact with the activated stone, she casts a spell as if it were affected by the feats Empower, Enlarge, and Extend. So essentially, it's a cool way to do Stonehenge, or like the druidic sacrifice kind of thing, in which you can create the sort of final boss, final encounter, or a sort of hype up moment where this artifact, this item is used, or the standing stone is used in a way that doesn't break the game and allows this magical extension to happen. Now, you could do this narratively, but it's very cool to also say, hey, I can do this here too, if I know what to do. So actually, standing stones would be very cool. Kind of reminds me a little bit of Skyrim in certain parts, where you would see the environment, but without the mechanics, like creating black soul gems in Skyrim. Like, there's a way to do it, but actually doing it's kind of impossible without mods. And so this is kind of one of those things that would like enable something cool to happen, especially with those sort of 3 modifiers, allowing you to bolster the spell past what's naturally possible. Infusions. This is kind of cool. Now, this would be very much something as even optional role druids as alchemists. So this is a very interesting way that D&D tried to essentially say, here is a potion for druids. And this very list is what really like inspires me. Let me zoom in. But essentially, hopefully, it has spell level on one side and then the spell school on the other. And you can see like Abjuration, Mayflower, Rosemary, Majorum, Felonwort, White Whorehound, Jewelweed, Nightspur, Murderbark, Unicorn Root, and Turtlewort. And so you have this hierarchy of spells like Assassin Seed, Feyblade, Seer Glove, Wolf's Bane being a 7th level enchanting herb. And so they go over the idea of like, collecting, gardening, preparing it, and making infusions for, like, essentially you would like, if you need bull strength, you'd create an infusion of bull strength so that, like, when you become a wolf or a bear, you would eat it and you'd become even stronger. Or you need a specific spell effect to happen, you'd fire a fireball out of your mouth kind of thing. Very interesting. I've actually never I think I've only made a few when I did play my druid character in old campaigns, but the idea that you could have a character or creatures that are gaining power by eating something specific. And that being a very thematic aspect to describing not only like someone going and preparing and having the storeroom and garden, but and then for those who know what these can be used for, like one, having the examples is awesome. This actually reminds me of the Herbalist Primer, which is also kind of a cool supplement to look at for like plants and what their possible uses are. Because you see some common ones here too, like thyme, garlic, mistletoe, foxglove. So very, very cool. Animal companions, better than average animals, the bond, animal mood and attitude, limitations. So very much everything you need to know about your animal companion. Food and care, breaking limits. There's some stuff about like bringing it into the town or having it fend for its own. Raising your companion. This is pretty much like one of my favorite sections because I loved animal companions, and hence the Awakened book, and hence the Baby Bestiary and all that. Awakened animals. This was literally like a huge part of my inspiration because it's a 5th level spell where you can just give things sentience. And then we have a couple other large creatures. These are also great for druids who are looking to do wild shape, and that wild shape is based on your CR. So knowing that there's sort of like cooler versions or epic or more epic versions of those creatures, like the legendary wolf and stuff. They didn't get any special abilities per se outside of the standard creature. They're just like hyped up versions of them, like an 18 hit dice horse, a 20 hit dice bear, 230 HP. Like, it only has 21 AC, but it has a 27 attack and where's its damage? 46 or 2d6 plus 13 claw and a 46 plus 6 bite. So it's not like for a party of like 8th level adventurers. I mean, it's still a ton of hit points. Like, it's gonna get hit by everything, but it's gonna plow through anything you've got. So it's a very interesting like use case in terms of like the powerful, but also something that you could use at lower levels to sort of like showcase these like awesome creatures. And then prestige classes. Now this is what really inspired me about doing this whole series. Because these are like the character archetypes that, one, a lot of people refer back to when trying to build their own prestige classes or subclasses for the new editions of whatever game they're playing, be it D&D, be it Pathfinder, be it anything else, Savage Worlds, or any system that you're making. And these are usually a lot of reference points that, because they're so old now, well, they're not that old, but you know what I mean. Because they're so old that people reference back to these because they're inspiring, they're very flavorful. So like Animal Lord, we have Animal Bond, Animal Sense, Animal Speech, Totems, Animal Far Speech. So this kind of reminds me of like Beastmaster in a sense. Share Greater Form. So let's see what some of these do. Here we have one of the ocean with dolphins. But let's see. Animal Bond, beginning, you develop a bond for animals with your selected group. So you select an ecosystem essentially. The Marine Lord's Bond extends to porpoises, whales, and other aquatic mammals, as well as fish, because the bond of all the appropriate kinds automatically have a friendly attitude towards the animal lord. So very specific to what ecosystem. So here we go. 8 animal lords: Ape Lord, Bear Lord, Bird Lord, Cat Lord, Equine Lord, Marine Lord, Snake Lord, Wolf Lord. I think they could have done, because they use like Cat Lord versus feline, or, you know, but yeah. Animal Sense, you can sense animals within your group. Animal Speech, you can converse with animals of your selected group. And then you can use Wild Shape to take a form of anything in that group. And then they specifically state like dire form or legendary form. Now, typically, prestige classes you're usually able to take at level 6. So this would put you to level 16 for the final capstone, or level 6 for the first one. That's just kind of how prestige classes were designed, although there are exceptions to that. Like this one. Yeah, you need 6 ranks of animal empathy. So you need... you might be able to take it a little bit before. 8. There you go. 6. Yeah, so you definitely need at least level 5 to start taking levels. So Bane of Infidels. Now, the leader of a xenophobic tribe. Now, this is probably something that would very much be more the villain character, because remember, the DM also had to create characters against the players. So we see Newman, I don't actually know how to pronounce that, Energumen, Newman, and then Pyre, then Hearth Protection, Sacrifice. This is very much a very interesting cult. So this would be like mass sacrifice, like Jesus. Remember, session 0, kids. There is, what is you? So sacrifice essentially increases your effective caster level, which is something interesting to think about. But to mechanize it can be very dangerous, especially if you mechanize it for players. So be very, very, like, detect loyalty. What the heck? That's such a weird thing. So I would say this is mostly a problematic prestige class that didn't age well, but it makes a very interesting villains if your players are okay to this kind of like villain slash, if it's not even a villain, sort of counter slash like community trying to preserve itself, but through less than moral means. So like there's an interesting angle you could take to it, but overall it is kind of broadly problematic. The Blighter. So now we have sort of the negative version of the Druid. Instead of creating life, you're creating blight. So deforestation, burning hands, sustenance, undead wild shape, speak with dead animal, undead wild shape, contagious touch, and then plague. Plague, the blighter can spread. Actually, let's just read the intro, because this is actually kind of a very, like, the art's kind of interesting and the whole concept is kind of cool. When a druid turns away from the land and the land turns away from her, some ex-druids make peace with this change. Others seek to restore the bond. So an interesting thing D&D 3rd edition had was X classes. So like when the paladin no longer followed their god, they became a X-paladin. When the monk no longer was lawful, they become an X-monk, and they would lose access to their class features. And so some of these prestige classes would exist to restore those powers, but in an opposite way, or in a way that like was against the class. So the paladin's foil is the blackguard. I don't think the monk had anything outside, but then like for the druid, you sort of had like the blighter coming in with like the negative aspect of the druid. So deforestation can kill all non-sentient plants within a 50-foot radius per blighter level. So very specific, though. The vast majority of blighters are nomadic loners, constantly in search of green lands to destroy. Now, you can see that how this is very villainous in this way. Some are grim, others laugh at the destruction they wreak. Almost all are friendless and mad. Whatever puts them over the edge, knowing that the nature gets the last laugh. To gain their spells, they must seek out the richest forests, even if it's to destroy them. Thus, they have been turned away from nature. They must constantly return to it. Only human ex-druids seem to attract, in any number, to the blighter's path. Legends say a few elven druids have also turned to destruction over the millennia. A terrifying prospect, given how much land they could destroy in their long lifelines. So, already kind of a hook in there, but remember, speciation very much ties into cultures and culture representation that you have. So, but something interesting worth noting. Undead wild shape, specifically skeletons. Very cool idea. I'm actually surprised can separate the bond of a bonded animal and magical beast, such as a companion, familiar, or mount. Very like notable ability, which is actually kind of interesting for like a roleplay sense. We have the Bloodhound, which is probably exactly as it sounds. Determination, mark, no subtle penalty. So this is actually someone who's hunting people and bringing them back alive. So this is like a ranger, very much fracture, shatter, improved subtle damage, move like the wind. So very much tracking and hunting. So this is like extreme hunter or bounty hunter, essentially. And then it gives you an organization of bloodhounds. I don't remember. Yeah, some bloodhounds limit themselves to checking down criminals. Others are willing to hunt down anyone who can pay. So there's your sort of morality aspect to it. Deepwood Sniper, a very good ranged weapon class, although between the Arcane Archer and the Deepwood Sniper, and I think there's another one that was also really good. This is one of the lesser ranged weapons classes, but you do get safe poison use, concealment reduction, so if adversaries were hiding behind rocks, there was concealment in D&D, which was 90%, 50%, stuff like that, where you had a chance to miss. Range increment bonus, so you could shoot farther. Consistent aim. You can re-roll one attack that you made, so essentially advantage. True Strike, which is an amazing spell. Essentially, you get plus 20 to your attack. So, very much the ranged weapon. The Exotic Weapon Master. I think this one was for any exotic weapon. I remember looking at this for some interesting builds that I was trying to do. The Exotic Weapon Master can use any exotic weapon which he or she is not proficient in, a -2 penalty instead of -4, and this penalty is reduced again. So yeah, essentially anyone who wants to fight with any weapon. They don't really get many skills, so broadly class is very not great, but there aren't very many levels in it. There are only 5. So exotic weapon focus, improvised weapons, exotic specialization, you get bonus to damage, and then greater improvised weapons, which essentially is another feat as well. Interesting idea, but not really well executed. It was usually used in combination with other things. The Eye of Grumsh, or Grumish. So for those who don't know, Grumsh was one of the gods of the orcs, and his eye was poked out by the elven god Corleon. And with that was sort of the elven orc conflict that essentially existed with D&D forever. And so this one was especially a thematic version of someone who followed Grumsh, poked out his eye, kind of reminiscent of Odin in a sense, but blind flight, follow orders blindly, rage, swing blindly, blinding spittle, blind sight. Nothing really interesting, honestly, with that one either. I mean, it makes a very interesting war chief kind of appearance, but outside of that, I probably wouldn't use this ritual scarring, rage, follow orders. Grant a morale bonus on any non-good orcs or half-orcs with HD lower than his character level. So, yeah, very much a leader kind of design. But I would very much look at what the organization is and what it's trying to accomplish, more so than, why does this group extremely hate orcs, and why are they hunting, or if they are hunting, or why are they just trying to be... And, you could have someone like this and have an entirely non-combat interaction with them. And I think that would be interesting, because looking outside of the lens of fighting in D&D, you could get some interesting social conflicts in terms of they don't want to fight, but they need to get something done, and so you have to essentially undergo the morality of are these people you're willing to help, or are you willing to just walk away from them, and will that come back to bite them later? So I would find the social aspect more interesting today than I would when I was 12. The Foe Hunter, Rancor. The Foe Hunter can deliver a powerful blow to her hated enemy once per round. On her action, she can designate one of her attacks against a hated enemy as a Rancor attack. Before the attack roll is made, a successful Rancor attack made by a first level Foe Hunter deals bonus extra 1d6 damage and increases. So it's essentially a rogue, but against a specific enemy, or against a specific hated enemy. Nothing too special, but it really works well if you're trying to pick a specific target. And I don't know, this would probably work better as an NPC that is hunting something that the players are helping out. Aha, this one. This is one of my favorites. The Forsaker. Magic is evil, magic tempts, magic perverts, magic corrupts. Anyone who cannot embrace these truths has no business considering the path of the Forsaker. This was a prestige class designed for characters who forsook magic and did not use any magic items. Now, this was a very tricky thing because back in 3rd edition, magical items were everywhere, and they pretty much were part of your level scaling, or your difficulty scaling with the game. And so what this tried to do is create create like a barbarian subclass that would allow characters to forsake items. So they got crazy things like fast healing, which means every round you would regain hit points. Forsake magic, you couldn't use it, and you gained spell resistance, resistance to magic, and damage reduction, so that you would reduce the damage taken. For this is 3/+1. You would reduce all damage taken by 3 unless it was a magical +1 weapon or more. And then magic destruction. In order to maintain your power, you had to destroy a magical item every so often. So, also very interesting class, very cool concept for like an anti-concept, I guess. That was the antithesis of the system. There's another one in the Book of Exalted Deeds called the Vow of Poverty as well, which was very similar, in which that you forsook all items or all equipment for all of these buffs that would level up with you. Broadly, though, the fast healing was cool, but not high enough for the higher levels, and the spell resistance is good, but in 3rd edition, the spell resistance, everyone would take feats, essentially, so they would have bonuses to spell resistance, so like your chance of actually resisting magic that much weren't that great. But very cool and scary concept. And you gained ability score bonuses, which was also cool. The Frenzied Berserker, essentially the Barbarian on more Barbarian. I think the difference to this was, well, you gain +6 bonus to strength, a single extra attack each round at your highest bonus. But you receive a -4 penalty to AC and take 2 points subtle damage per round. So a rage with an extra attack, and you take damage. That's pretty much it. I mean, that kind of reminds me of certain bosses. You could definitely use this for a lot of things, like Remain Conscious, Supreme Cleave, Deathless Frenzy would make a great like warband enemy that's like cleaving through a bunch of people and refusing to go down. Something for the players to deal with. Works great for that. Excuse me. Sickness is catching up with me. Geomancer. This one's a really cool one. And what this... I'm actually mixing this up with another one, aren't I? No. So, the Cleric reaches out to a higher power. The Wizard trusts on only Eldritch Tomes. The Druid looks to nature for spells. The Geomancer, all magic is the same. And so... Geomancy is the art of channeling magical energy from many sources through the land itself. May research like a wizard, pray like a cleric, or sing like a bard, but cast spells only as a geomancer can. In the area he calls home, he waves ley lines, connections to the land itself, and casts power through the connections. So, characters with only one more spell cast can become. With more than one, the most popular combinations are Druid Sorcerer with Druid Wizard, clerics also qualify with the plant domain, and a bard or ranger who picks up a second, more focused spellcasting can also do this. So I think, yeah, so what's interesting about this one is you only gain, when taking levels, you drift, which means you kind of you gain these interesting abilities as you go, and as you can see, I marked up some ideas for abilities. But also you gain +1 level of existing spellclass. So if you were level 3 Wizard, level 4 Druid, you would have to pick whether you wanted to go to level 5 Druid in the spellcasting, or level 4 in the Wizard. So like you had to choose what additional spells you got from where. There were some later on that would grant both. I'm actually thinking of a different prestige class, but my brain is escaping me on which one that is. But drift is cool because as you would drift, you got to pick, like, stage 1 was very aesthetic. You sprout feathers, but not wings. Light downy fur covers your skin. But then, 2, you become graceful as a cat, gain a +4 bonus to balance checks. You constrict like a snake. Or you can grab like a giant bear, you get improved grab. So, you gained weird abilities, sort of connecting with nature and the ley lines, which was interesting. it was a very kind of cool concept, but like I didn't feel like it had enough flavor to it, especially with the drift not really giving it any mechanical direction or theme. We have the Hexer, which kind of also Grumsh. I mean, this was Forgotten Realms based, so I'm not surprised. But we had hexes, Sicken Hex, Fear Hex, Sleep Hex, Charm Hex. If you're familiar with the Witch of Pathfinder, which we'll eventually go through as well, you'll see a lot of similarities. Interestingly, you have to be able to cast the Lightning Bolt and have Wilderness Lore 10 ranks. I forget the ranking numbers. I think it was like 4. You start first level with 4 and then 1 per level. So 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So you can only take this until 7th level or 8th level. So that's one of those like weird exception classes. King, Queen of the Wild. So this was very much like the Ranger Wanderer, in which you would gain favored terrain. This was pretty much the favored terrain class of a specific terrain. Native creatures, endure elements, detect animals or plants. Very much focused. Now, for D&D, it didn't work really well, but it's very cool to have characters that are in tune with the land that they have, like the Totem Lord or even King, Queen of the Wild. If you're looking for your weird ooze boss, or my brain's blanking on which villain it is, but essentially you have the Ooze Master, which is pretty much exactly as it sounds. Alchemy, Swim, Great Fortitude, and 3rd level spells. 3rd level spells came around 5th level, so you take this 6th level, or get this around 6. Minor Ooze Touch, Charisma Penalty, Oozy Gob, Slithering Face, Malleability, Indiscernible Anatomy, Slime Wave, 1 with the Ooze. Also, kind of funny that you just lose Charisma, because that was essentially like, oh, you're less social, because I guess you're becoming the Ooze. So you got to choose what kind of like ooze that you were. With Major Ooze, like Gelatinous Cube was there as a Major Ooze, Black Pudding, Green Slime, Yellow Mold. There were a lot of ways that D&D tried to kill players. This was my personal favorite, that my highest level and longest campaign character was a Shifter. Now this is essentially just wild shape on steroids. Greater wild shapes, you got humanoids, monstrous humanoids, beasts and plants, vermin, magical beasts, aberration, dragons, constructs, elementals, outsiders, up to gargantuan size. So you could be anything. And you would also gain the supernatural abilities of that too. And then eventually Ever-Shifting Form, which is your 10th level, which you could just shift forever. Like there was no limitation to how much you could shift. And so this was really cool because, one, it's accessible to people who knew Polymorph and Alter Self, which I think is really cool, but also just for Druids it makes sense. Broadly, Shifter characters aren't really common NPCs. I remember there being a very interesting discussion about how non-binary or even non-traditional gender roles or representations are very much in like the Shifter biology, because a lot of just culturally Shifters aren't really like trusted. So that's one thing to overcome, but also Shifters as a class in a world would probably never interact with people. Like, why would someone who can change shapes to all these different things like interact with people? They would probably just inhabit the world unless they have some greater mission. And I think that's where it could get interesting of why you would interact with them. But then the players would then have to figure out, why is this not a doppelganger? Why is this not a wizard? And so on and so forth. I think it's very interesting. I think the reason why my character went out exploring, other than totally forgetting about halfway through the campaign, was I was a forest gnome Shifter that had a vow of poverty because I was a weird min-maxer back then, but it was cool with the group. But I was trying to make the world a better place, and so I actually did end up taking like a bribe for the wrong reason to try and help people. Got turned on me. It was a weird mess. But overall, I would almost see them like dragons. They sort of just kind of are, but also are not. I think generally, though, it's a cool concept, but not really a good concept for characters or use in the game. If you do have ideas, though, I'd be very curious to hear how you use shifters in your game, or could use shifters in your world. Because, yeah, they're just very, very interesting, very fluid characters. We have the Tamer of Beasts. This was another favorite of mine, in which the Druid got an animal companion. So did the Ranger, but the Druid got more hit dice in animal companions. The Tamer of Beasts turns that to 11 and gives them pretty much multiplies the number of beasts they can get. Can have animal companions whose hit dice total no more than the sum of twice his Tamer of Beast level plus twice his caster level for animal friendship. So you can have a lot of, like Druid level 7, Tamer Beast 3 can have up to 20 hit dice of animal companions. No individual animal companion can have more hit dice than the Tamer of Beasts does. So, wowzer, that's like, as you can see, like the horde of rats. My vision was always shocker lizards, but yeah, and share spells, command creatures of kind, magical beast mastery. This was, if you need like Pan Piper, but on steroids with any creature, be it dinosaurs, be it shocker lizards, rust monsters. Like I know it probably had to be limited to animals, I think. Yeah, animal companions, but like if you stretch it a little bit, like this inspiration could go wild. Tempest, essentially Blade Master, offhand parry, greater 2-weapon fighting, absolute dexterity, supreme 2-weapon fighting, nothing there. Verdant Lord, here's where we got our plant, create infusion, expert infusion, sun sustenance, tree into wild shape, animate tree, Gaia's embrace, fast healing, pretty much as long as you're like in contact with the sun. Any non-evil, interestingly. If you like Ents or a druid who like has Ent friends, this is a good pick. And then there's also an order, which is nice. I do like the organizational examples because, at least at the time, they were helpful to go and think about the world in a greater context of just a subclass. Watch Detective. This is kind of funny. City Watch Training, Expertise, Obsessive Specialty, Profile, Cooperative Interrogation, Superior Disarming. Actually kind of an interesting. Sense Secret Doors, Locate Object, Improved Subtle, Forensics. This is actually... This was your Urban Ranger subclass, essentially. With a successful stealth check, 8th level or higher, Watch can detect or discern the cause of death of any corpse he examines. Holy crap. He may take 20 on this roll. Holy crap! Then he knows what killed the person, the size or approximate strength of the attacker responsible, and any other key information the DM wants to impart. So, yeah, if you're like investigation-y, like this, or urban, like this is a very interesting subclass to take, and it also creates a very unique like NPC as well. I mean, this is kind of at the same time as your like Sherlock Holmes kind of in a sense, but with like interrogation, disarming, subtle damage, secret doors, no subtle penalty, skill synergies. Yeah, so. And then we have our Wind Rider. The Wind Rider is essentially your mount, but you like to fly. Pretty much is like the, I want a legendary eagle. I want to be a halfling and a legendary eagle and be a sniper. So, praise mount, chosen mount, mount proficiency, mount luck, mount link, mount friendship. And there we are, throwing a pillar off at our enemies below. And what's cool is your mount got bonus hit dice, natural armor, and strength. So it was very nice as a way to make mounts kind of more interesting. And then going more into like what's a mount. And then we have spells. Spells and list of spells, there's always a lot. Let me just take a quick look. Animal Trick, Dark Seed, Slow Kills Plants. Animal becomes shaken, Camouflage, Power Sight, determines creature's hit dice or level. That's actually kind of weird. Decomposition, Green Blockade, creates a wall of vegetable matter. Bottle of Smoke. Let's look at the back side. Thunderstorm, True Reincarnate. Ooh, Looking Glass, connects 2 mirrored surfaces for clairvoyance and transport. That's kind of cool. Invulnerability to elements. Epidemic, Jesus. That's kind of terrifying, actually. Cloudwalkers, Mandragora, deafens those who fail will saves, grants true seeing to others. That's actually kind of interesting. Slime Wave, we got our slime spells. Adrenaline Surge, Cloak of the Sea, and then just the list. And let's see if there's any art. Bottle of Smoke, that's kind of cool. Plume of Smoke, which you can capture in a special bottle you're holding, therefore opened before the spell duration expires. The smoke emerges to form a vaguely horse-like creature made of wisps of smoke. So essentially, Spectral Steed. Dawn, Counter Moon. Ooh, stops Lycanthrope from changing form. 3rd level spell. That's kind of cool. The subject retains whatever form he had when the spell was cast for the duration. Even death does not cause the reversion to normal form until the spell ends. Natural Lycanthropes gain a +4 bonus against a saving throw against the spell. Very cool. Might of the Oak, always a great. +4 strength, -2 dex. Mass Awaken. You can awaken 1 or more trees, animals to human-like sentience. All awakened creatures must be the same kind. To succeed, you must make a will save. DC 10 plus the highest target, hit dice target. Once awakened, they're friendly towards you. You have no special connection otherwise, but you can communicate with it. And then they gain 3d6 intelligence, 1d3 charisma, and 2 hit dice. And they know a language. Some more art. Regeneration was an interesting one. Sandblast. Thunder Swarm. That's such a cool piece of art. Look at that. I'm not sure why they did like the tribal style with like druidic. So there's kind of like a weird confusion of like style choices or thematic choices. And you have this like creepy guy here who's probably going to be sacrificed. But like you have the standing stones, you have the lightning balls. Very kind of cool image though. And and Water Ball, 4th level. Looks like a blue fireball. Blue pea-side streaks a point digit and packs upon a material. Solid barrier attaining the prescribed range. Blossoms into the water ball at that point. And any attempt to send the bead through a narrow passage as an arrow, you must hit the opening with a ranged touch attack, or else the bead strikes the barrier and detonates prematurely. When it detonates, it deals 1d6 points of subtle damage. An affected creature can make a reflex save, yada yada. Objects take no damage unless they have the hardness of 0. A full water skin that you burst when casting the spell. But yeah, that is Masters of the Wild. Anyways, I know this one is kind of long. I feel like other reviews will be kind of like this too, where I will flip through it, and I don't know if I need to like par this down. This is my 2nd time doing this, so if you have any suggestions, I'd be happy to take them. I do want to upgrade the camera quality because I do want to show more in-depth pictures and text so that when going through it, you guys can actually see what we're looking at, because images are great, but text not so much. But yeah, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one. And hopefully that will be the Sailor Moon tabletop role-playing game. So I got to keep that one. I got to read it, so hopefully tonight I'll go through it so I can at least talk about it as we go through. So thank you so much. Stay tuned and stay awesome.